this is just some pre-recorded footage that I recorded yesterday in multiplayer, and we were just messing around. You can see we've loaded the car transporter up. I'm not the best driver, and I am going to crash this a few times and lose the cars off the top, but it's just some footage of the background. Let's get into some questions. Let's look at the first question. Let's get straight in. Would you be able to add dragging specialist equipment like ammo, C4, first aid kits, etc.? Asked by Mindsmith. Add dragging specialist equipment. I see. So I guess this is where you're placing the block down and you drag along one direction and it's going to create a strip of them. I'm going to say that is possible. Should it be possible? Does it follow the game? So it's very easy for us to do. I think it's just a single setting on the definition file. I think it'd be very easy to mod in actually. But in terms of us adding it, let's have a little think. I think it's just a case of us remaining consistent with how we've developed the other items. And yes, you want items that can be make sense to be spawned in an array. I'll note that one down and I will discuss it with the team. I won't give a fixed answer on that, but I think it certainly is possible. And I'll just also mention, I think it is, I think it's in the component definition file for what can be spawned by dragging. So it is probably moddable as well, but I'll note that down to discuss with team. So it's drag array equipment, C4, etc. Will sales be added? Says Adventurer888. This comes up every time. I think what I'm going to suggest is that we are doing our best, and if we do add them, it would be a major update. We have worked on it in the past and kind of given up. We've worked on it more recently, and we're still trying. As discussed before, it's just a little bit difficult to get with the physics balance. Obviously the water is a little bit treacly, and the components are very much kind of generic blocks, whereas for a sailboat the dynamics to work, it's so fine-tuned. But we are looking at that. We're thinking perhaps have like a keel component or something, so we might add sails and also a keel component. So this is something that is being looked at, but we haven't announced anything yet, but hopefully a sails major update in the future if possible. We're doing our best. Next question, could there be more types of cargo like pallets, logs, steel beams and so on? I think we've actually got a minor update on the way here that will hopefully resolve that request. So yeah, we've got some interesting cargo mission stuff on the way as a minor update, hopefully, and hopefully within the next few months. So yeah, watch the announcements for that one. But I'm quite excited for that one. It should be a very good update if we can get it finished and out. Next question, can you add rotation position outputs to the stabilized camera the same as the large velocity pivot? And that's by Exit. So the rotation position outputs to stabilized camera. Yeah, I think we can do that, can't we? We must surely be computing it. And the rotation position outputs to the stabilized camera, I suppose this is for assistance with aiming your turret, I suppose, to match what the stabilized camera is doing. Kind of surprised we haven't already done that. I'll note that down. So pos plus rotation output for stabilized camera. Noted down. I will discuss that with the team. I don't see why we couldn't do that. Thoughts on adding some character survival aspects such as food, water, rest, exhaustion. I don't know about that one. I think we've looked at the survival stuff a few times. I feel like this is a very good request because it does kind of recognize that, I guess, that link between, the Stormworks simulation world and the stuff you build. And I think for me, the game as a design game, there is this really strong link between designing something and using it, and certainly building on, I guess, the using vehicles to survive the environment is a really nice way to link things in. But I don't think the game fully works as a survival game simply because of the dependence of the workshop so strongly. So I don't know whether we will add food, water, rest yet. It's not planned at the moment, so that will probably be further down the line if we decided to do it. I think it's just the question then of what we're trying to kind of like move towards in terms of the overall experience, and are we ending up with a more fractured product? Because I think that recently our efforts have been to consolidate what we've done a little bit more, try and go back over the stuff we've done in the past, reduce the total bugs, make the game more stable, more robust, and fill in the gaps a bit where the game is. We haven't been so much expanding what the game is as much as we've been trying to improve the overall quality and finish of the features that are already here, which I think is a good strategy. It's certainly a nice aspect, like a well-fitting aspect to expand Stormworks into more of a survival direction. But then I think it just opens the game up more, where you're going to feel like, okay, well, what about all this space between Stormworks as it currently is and then this new survival bit that we've strapped onto the side? But there's kind of a gap between there, kind of thing, where there's other features that should really kind of fill in that gap to glue those two things together. So I'm not sure. Next question: are there any new updates on changing the Lua character limit? We do have a task on the board. I know this is a minor thing, and I know it literally is changing one number. It's just that we just have a release schedule now, and we're typically putting one feature change in per update, and we can do it. It just needs testing. It's literally probably changing one number in a few places, and then just testing it and making sure that there's no unexpected side effects. So it does need some time in the release schedule, and we're just trying to get ourselves to the point where our updates are more solid. So it really is, it's just the testing time that's required for that. Obviously it's very easy to change. We will do it if it passes testing, which I'm hoping it will, but yeah, we just need to look at that. It is planned. We are planning to do it still. I can't remember where it is. Shall I just have a look? Excuse me, that's my voice. I've been chatting to the dev team all day, so I've done a lot of talking. Let's have a quick look. What is it? It's the character limit. Oh, it's quite far away. It's quite far down the board there. It's currently scheduled for May 2025. That's quite far, isn't it? I will chat to the cheat team about that then, and see if we can move that Lua character limit, because that is quite a long time to wait for a small change. If we can get that sooner, we will try. Currently it is scheduled quite far down, and we just got loads of stuff on the board that we're planning on doing. It's just one of the things. It's not the only thing we're working on, which is why it's not happened sooner. I will just go through and just click mark answer on a bunch of these so I know what I've answered. I've answered that one, I've answered that one, that one, that one, that one. Right, next question please. Will we get more options with modding, or will we be locked into what we currently have? So I think this is what I kind of want to chat to you guys about, really. I want to get feedback on the modding. I know that I've been watching like the YouTube videos that we've got on feedback. We've been reading the support site and so on. So we're aware of, and there's the chat on Discord as well. But we're aware of a lot of what's been discussed with the modding. I think it's the case of us getting to the situation where um, I suppose it's potentially a few updates on this modding stuff. I think it is a new direction for us, and I think what I'll just mention with that is to say that I'm getting a bit waffly here. I think with the modding, it's a big topic. I think trying to do it all in one major update would probably be a mistake, because it's probably better to be a little bit more reactive with players who are doing mods, giving feedback, telling us what they need. I know that we've had quite a constructive relationship with the Lua add-on community, where as players like Woe, for example, I think they got a shout out last stream. They let us know what they want in the Lua API all the time. We add the functions, and I think there's that kind of relationship. I think we're thinking about developing and continuing to work on. So in that respect, I think we're saying that we're gonna basically look at what players ask for and support them in creating their mods. I think that's our plan. So are you getting more modding stuff? Yes, and we'll talk more about that, I'm sure, as the stream goes on. But I think part of the Stormworks support now, and obviously if modding isn't such a big thing, then I guess it's demanding less time of us. But if there are lots of players who are looking to make mods and they are asking us for features, then yeah, I think we're prepared to add in support for various things as is required. But it is obviously going to take up development time to support modding. But I think we're at that point now where we're kind of prepared to do that. So that's my plan with that. Quite a long response, but I just wanted to be thorough. Next question: is there any chance we could get pivots powered by RPS, also manual variable values and P-coats? I think that's manual variable valves, I think, and P-coats. I have no idea what a P-coat is. Manual variable valves, don't know, potentially. We've got the on-off valve, haven't we? I guess the manual variable valve, the problem with it is kind of needs two voxels. I think the way the game works is that we've got, with like the throttle lever, for example, you've got the two buttons. But yes, we could have some kind of variable valve system. I think it's about getting the game to work in a way that makes sense. There is a relationship between the graphics and the functionality of a lot of components, and often with these components, if there's something you interact with, it's a red piece of geometry. So for example, on the throttle lever, you kind of got the two buttons, haven't you, to go up and down, and there's a little bit of that in the game. To change it, we could do, I don't know. Variable valves are possible. I think it's been discussed before. I don't know whether we're going to do it or not. And it's the same with the powered pivots by RPS. I think this one's a little clearer. I think the energy conservation isn't particularly going to work particularly well to go from the physics engine, where it's a pivot, which is it's an internal physics library thing. We're using the bullet constraints, the bullet physics library's constraints, and the way that's working is it's creating and destroying power in order to achieve like a stable physics behavior, not necessarily to react to a certain amount of energy being applied in a certain way. It's more about getting the joints to move in the way you want it to move. So there isn't really a library of support for getting pivots powered by RPS, and then it'll like 20 or 40 RPS. These pivots are really going to start to spin, aren't they? So I don't know whether it's a good idea for Stormworks particularly. Plus it does make it kind of more complicated to build stuff. Plus there is already the electric powered one. I don't know on that stuff. It's possible we can add that stuff in the future. There isn't a plan to do any of that at the moment. Next question, please. My posts and comments on the issue tracker are invisible to everyone else. So this can be something that happens if in certain situations. We did discuss this last time, so I won't go too into it. But effectively, if a single account posts too many issues too quickly, or it posts lots of issues over a longer period of time, and lots of them are not accepted as issues on our side of things, then the system can automatically move issues into the moderation queue. And the moderation queue basically means that it's posts that are suspected of spam or otherwise non non-productive posting. It's like a tricky one for us because obviously we really appreciate players giving us feedback and helping us with that stuff. But I think some users are being more successful and productive than others in getting changes made to the game. We do want to hear everyone's feedback. I think there is just this aspect that we've just got to make sure that one user who produces 100 issues on the issue tracker doesn't get 100 times more attention than the one user or the 100 users that just produce one issue each, kind of thing. We're just trying to balance that out a little bit so that we're being fair on everyone. So then there is this low priority queue. Obviously, if you're a power user like WoW, where you've just got like 50, 60, 70 issues that have all been accepted, then you're kind of, you obviously your issues still carry on going straight through. So I guess if your issues aren't visible, often the answer is just to wait as we go through the moderation queue. If you have just posted loads really quickly, then as we go through that backlog of the moderation queue, then you might find your account just gets released automatically because we've now read the issues and they shouldn't be moderated. Otherwise, if it is just that you've got a lot of issues that you've posted and only a small number have actually been successful in game changes, I can't remember how the details. It's all driven by code and it's all automatic. But I guess the answer is to make sure that your future issues are certainly issues that we are able to reproduce and so on. So yeah, it's a long-winded answer for that one, but I think I've covered it. Next question, please. Will adding mods to an existing save game be added? Don't know. Probably not. It's a little bit like the add-ons situation. I'm not entirely clear what the implications of changing what's active and what's loaded in a game is going to be. I know with the add-on stuff, we kind of don't want to be hot loading mods in and out, simply because if the add-ons got changed, then it can potentially break the game, and there's that a bit of compatibility. So we're just trying to avoid a little bit of that stuff. And just generally, like the mods, I suppose, do shape the world a little bit. It's a bit unclear. Like some mods are just changing a sound effect, some mods are changing the environment and the physics that you stood on, and so on. So you might mod your world and you fall through the floor because where you saved your vehicle, the floor's been raised because the mod is now loaded and stuff. So we're trying to avoid that stuff a little bit. So probably not. I know that you can manually edit your save files. I am aware of that. But it's not necessarily going to work. It can cause the issue I just described, where, for example, the terrain has been changed, and it can mean that the game doesn't quite make sense anymore. We don't want to be doing stuff where it's going to break players' saves. Probably wants to be done with caution. So I'm not sure we are going to allow you to hot load and unload mods from an existing save. Next question, please. What is the space orbit formula? I was able to get a circular orbit. So, this is actually possibly a question I can answer. A lot of these questions, it's like, oh, what's the formula for this? And of course, it's like 120 lines of code. It's not. It's not just a single formula. But I think with this stuff, it probably is. There certainly is a geostationary altitude, and then there's various other circular orbits where you're not stationary relative to the ground. You're traveling, but you're traveling at the correct speed to maintain your height of that orbit. And so I think the space orbit formula is something like constant times by, I think the gravitational force equals the some constant multiplied by the altitude plus, I think it's either the x or the z velocity also multiplied by some constant value. And so yeah, basically you can just watch your altitude. I think it's probably better to just do it kind of reactively. Watch your altitude and accelerate in some. It might just be your horizontal velocity rather than your x or your z velocity. I think it might just be just overall horizontal velocity multiplied by a constant. So if you accelerate in the horizontal direction, then effectively you have this centrifugal effect which pushes you away from the surface, so that will also increase your up force in order to balance out the effect of gravity. So I think it's something like that. Next question please. The Lua will be used to interact with audio such as text-to-speech or other implementations. We don't have a text-to-speech library, and we did discuss previously, didn't we, the option of potentially having sound generated with Lua, for example, like tones and stuff. I don't know. Now we've added the file modding stuff in, I think a lot of this audio stuff you can do with just like modding in your buzzers. You can have modded buzzers, for example, quite easily now, which can play whichever sound effect, and you can just add the sound effects in. So that allows you to do like musical creations a little bit easier. The text-to-speech stuff, I don't think we would add that in. I'm not sure what the library requirements would be, or whether that's a Windows API thing or whatever, but it'd be difficult to achieve that in a multi-platform environment so that it works on Mac as well. But I've just never done text-to-speech before, so I don't really know. But I don't think it's something the game really needs either, so I don't think that's something we would be adding. Thank you for the question though. Next question, where can I submit new ideas for parts and upgrades? You can do this on the issue tracker, so when you start the game there's of course the report a bug and request a feature button. If you press the request a feature button, it takes you through to the issue tracker, and you can create an issue there and just mark it as a feature, and just ask your question, describe what you want, and just do it in enough detail that we can kind of understand what you mean. And if it's a Stormworks part, maybe just tell us, like, for example, how big the part should be in blocks, and what you expect the functionality of the part to be. And yeah, we do go through and we do discuss the support tracker tickets frequently as development team. So yeah, we'll look forward to reading your issues and you reading your suggestions and discussing it with the team. Next question, will Stormworks have any future plans to add Steam Cloud saves? Well, we do have Steam Cloud, but we don't have it for saves, and I'm not a massive fan of the Steam Cloud stuff. I think for big files it doesn't work particularly well. You end up in the situation where it kind of ends up saving forever. At least that's how it used to be. So we did initially add it for the saves. It's really easy for us to do. You literally just have to go into the Steam console and just enter the folder where the saves are kept, and then you click save, and then it's just done. The problem is that it doesn't work particularly well, for the reasons I just gave. That Steam Cloud just doesn't seem to like these huge files. It seems takes a long time to get them saved and loaded back up again. I appreciate that kind of feature is useful to players, but it's just that the Stormworks saves can get very, very large with like big vehicles and stuff, big worlds. You can end up with a very large save file. So I think we're just apprehensive to add that stuff back in at this point. It's certainly something we can look at in the future. You know, maybe Steam Cloud's better supported by Valve now. I don't know. I will note that down. Steam Cloud for saves. And I'll chat with the development team about that one, but I don't know. It's just, it is technically a bit awkward with the Steam Cloud and the large files. Next question: will there be a dedicated map editing tools? Will it be just Blender or Maya? Yes, Blender or Maya, I believe is the case. This is how we're doing it. With the map editing, we're creating the maps with 3D editor. We actually have a separate piece of software for the big islands that slices them up into the 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer squares, and that's quite useful for us. I'll just say that yeah, we haven't added that tool to the SDK yet. I think we're looking for feedback from players. That's something that's needed. Then we can, of course, add that tool in. But yeah, no, that's how we're doing it. There is no like 3D editing tool. I think it'd probably be a mistake for us to start trying to be like become developers of 3D editing software. I think there's no way we do as good a job as Blender and so on. So I think it makes more sense to be using Blender for creating islands and so forth. Next question. Just why so less polygons, window panels, and no smoke from fire, and no block panels? I'll just read this one again. It's because it's not quite making sense. So less polygons, window panels, no smoke from fire, no block panels. I don't know. I guess I think this question is just asking about components that they might like to have. First of all, the no smoke from fire, I think, is probably a graphics thing. It's a bit difficult for us to spawn a lot of particles because of the graphics performance. So I think we probably decided to omit the smoke you might get from a fire. I think there is smoke for forest fires, but vehicle fires, you just kind of get the flame effect. We don't add smoke to it. It's just graphics performance thing, to answer that one. And the window panels and no block panels and so on, I think is the same thing. It's just kind of a design decision, I guess. We've added some windows, but we haven't added every single possible window because it's probably a very large number if we started doing every possible window. I played around with Thales mod a little bit, and the window panels are really cool there, right? They allow you to do a lot of stuff. Very, very nice kit of tools. I think it works better as a mod than as an officially supported feature of the game, simply because I don't know how well Thales blocks work for like created sealed volumes and rendering with water, like touching the glass and stuff, and that's obviously an important feature for that stuff. So yeah, I think that's the answer to that one. Next question: will it be possible to modify the logic of mod blocks? So I'll quickly talk about the modding now. I remember I was watching 454's video on his feedback on the modding update and his concerns, and I thought a lot of the concerns, and it wasn't just his concerns actually, he did a great video where he goes through his community's concerns and feedback he's seen from actual players, and he goes through a bunch of people's thoughts, and I think there's a lot of very well thought through conversation. Some players were concerned, this is a new era for Stormworks, and is that in a good way? We want it to be in a good way, and I think we're just being cautious and gentle about going through this transition of going from a game that doesn't have this modding support to a game that does have this modding support, because we don't want to damage the game. It's in a great place. The community is amazing. The stuff we're seeing on the workshop is great. It's a healthy game, and we don't want to kind of take away from that and damage the experience. I've been playing games on Steam a long time, and it is frustrating when you play a game and then the developers come and they've changed some features and it's just not as good anymore. It just kind of changes the balance, and it just doesn't quite work for the way you're playing it. Maybe I'm cheesing the games too much, but I think we're trying to be careful around around that stuff. I think that's the main reason why we've decided to not allow uploading of creations with the modded blocks on. I think it's kind of, obviously, if you're using the modded blocks, that's kind of annoying that we've said that, but I think for everyone else, it's a massive relief that you're going to be able to just download a workshop creation and it's just going to work. You're not going to have to then go, okay, what components are missing here? Right, what's the mod I need? I've got to find the mod. Okay, now I need to start a new game with that mod enabled and so on. I think for components, what we've currently got doesn't work great for that situation. It works great if you just want to play with new components, but if you want to upload to the workshop as well, your creation's just not going to be compatible with for other people, and you're going to have some detailed instructions there on make sure you've got these mods installed, make sure these mods are enabled when you started your game, and then you can spawn this vehicle. It's awkward. It's very, very awkward thing, especially when you can't just expect software to just manage that for you. And so, that's what we've been talking about with our current modding implementation. It's asset modding. It's about modding a file. It's not about modding a component file. It's not about modding a component. It's just about modding a file. And we've abstracted that away. And that's quite good because it gives you the power of being able to mod all these different file types that we've got that are data driving the game. But when you're looking specifically at components, you can then see, okay, well, the components, for components, you actually want this specific behavior that is different to the rest of the modding, and I think 454 kind of touches on that a lot in his video, and I think we've seen similar feedback from players as well, and certainly the community members of 454's video, and so I think with that stuff we're interested in potentially, and this is something I think we want feedback from the player base on, but we're thinking, is that then one of the potential next directions for modding would be a specific component modding feature where there are certain, I guess, assets in the game that are being hot loaded. So for example, you can add a modded component while the game is started and so on, and when you then would we then embed those in a vehicle when it gets uploaded to the workshop? I think that's just the question there of, is that the best way to handle that? Just because I think for me, I don't think this really works if you can't just download something from the workshop and it just works. So that's an interesting direction to go in. I don't know how straightforward that's going to be. We're going to have to review it and have a look at the code. And if players don't want us to do that, if they've got other ideas for us, then we need to consider that as well. With the component modding, is that then possible for us to start to implement a API for this stuff, where we've got the Lua code potentially on components, because that would be really the next step. To allow players to create like really cool modded components. But yeah, this is stuff we're interested in supporting, and I would hope that we can continue to go further on this stuff. I think it's just about making sure that the next steps we take are the right ones and we are going in the right direction and we're not damaging what Stormworks is. I think that's really what we're thinking the most about. I'll click that as marked answered, and well, that was everything on my list. Let's refresh and see how many more questions there are. Oh, we've got 3 pages now. I will click shuffle 3 more times. 1, 2, 3. Right, and then I'll just carry on going. We've been going for 40 minutes, but I'll go for a bit longer. Brilliant. So British asks, more islands, question mark, more locations, more attention to Arctic, question mark. I don't know about more islands, more locations, and the reason I say that is because there's just so many islands and locations at this point. We did the Arid Industrial Frontier DLC, didn't we? That's been like the most enthusiastically received one, and we're thinking, well, maybe the game doesn't actually require more content at this point. There's enough locations. I think the fact that you can also mod locations, I mean, you can see in the video now, we've gone to this racing location. This is amazing. Such a good racetrack. but it's now possible for players potentially mod locations in if there was demand for that. But not that we're saying that players should be. I just think the base game just has enough locations at this point. If there was demand for players where they wanted to do stuff, but I'm just not sure we're going to add to the game by just putting more locations in. Does it really make Stormworks better? I'm not sure it does. So we don't have plans for that at the moment. More attention to the Arctic. I do like the Arctic. I think it's pretty cool as a part of the game. I think we are impacting on the Arctic as we do more mission content, which I've already mentioned in this stream. So yeah, I think Arctic's kind of getting more attention, but probably in a similar way to how the rest of the game world is getting more attention. So we're just trying to build up the missions content in the same way that we're building other stuff up as well. I'll mark that as answered. Next question: will small pivots that transfer RPS fluid ever come? Not powered by RPS, but transfer it. I mean, they could do, couldn't they? These miniaturized components could be quite good. I think I've said before, questions by Commissioner Watt, I think I've said before, there's, I suppose, this aspect of small vehicles in Stormworks, compact vehicles in Stormworks being tricky. Like in this video, obviously we're using some great ones. We've got some really beautiful cars. They're not easy to make, right? A lot of these are made with like modded or XML edited blocks, I should say, and so on. Like when you start doing trucks, it works better, and when you start doing trains and stuff, it works better. The really small vehicles, the base block is just a little bit too big. But yes, small pivots that transfer RPS fluid could come. It's not planned yet. I'll note that down. I'll discuss it with the team. It's all about really small pivots, transfer fluid plus RPS. It's more about getting things done in the right order and the right priority, I suppose, and just making sure that when we do a change or a feature, that it is benefiting players. Next question: will an add-on Lua callback for key presses be added? Only if the SW window is focused, of course. So, yeah, the character input, the game input. So there's no Lua API for a specific character. So I don't know whether it would make sense with the add-ons. It's about interfacing with, I suppose, the game simulation and spawning vehicles, hooking certain things, such as if a button has been pressed on a vehicle and so on, to actually query the input state of what it's the computer that the script's being run on. Well, if that's like a dedicated server, for example, then that's not going to work. So I don't know exactly if that would really make sense. Certainly you can query like vehicle input, so if the player's got like a remote control out or whatever, then you will get the input from that device. But general key presses, there isn't a plan to do that on it as an API basis. It doesn't really make sense because we don't have a script that is attached to a specific character for the purposes of doing logic on a per character basis. Next question: any chance to make insulated rooms from ambient heat so local cooling parts can work effectively? So I think if you just got a sealed room, it does protect from outside ambient temperature, doesn't it? Because the air isn't transferring, so that the air inside the contained room is encapsulated. I know Prof Incognito did a series of videos about cooling. I think 454 did as well. And you can see in those videos that it is possible to get these spaces down very low with that specific cooling part, the thermoelectric cooling element. It's like they do exist in real life. They are low power, so they don't transfer a huge amount of temperature. They are quite slow and passive. It's not about creating, like, you wouldn't find like a refrigerated truck, for example, using it. That would use like a compression style refrigerator like you'd have on the back of your actual refrigerator at home. Um, but we like to add that one because it was simple and it was compact and it would allow you to do some cooling. Obviously it kind of scales up, and you can cool stuff quite quickly if you have enough of them. But we could potentially add more cooling stuff if that was 4 players. I mean, I think it was quite a small component. I don't think it's massively useful because actually having a cool environment isn't that useful, other than knowing what the environment of your temperature is. I don't think it's really helping in situations where, for example, the player would take heat damage otherwise and so on. So it's just really about allowing the character to control the temperature inside a container a bit more accurately. But if there was appetite for more stuff like that, then we could potentially add more cooling parts. I just don't know how important that is at this point. We do have obviously the one cooling part, but I think it does work. If you watch the Prof Incognito videos, he does show that you can cool a room quite a lot and keep it cold from the outside. Next question, any word on a release date for the other game? From Judgmental Bird. We don't have a release date. This is quite like a unique situation we're in, that we're not really under any pressure to get this released, and so internally, it's all self-managed, it's self-funded and so on, so it's really up to us as to when we release it. And I think the answer for that is that we'll release it when it's finished and when it's done and it's good. I think we do obviously want to get it out to players, and I think to some degree we'd want to have a little bit of that. I don't want to say early access because I think we want to just do a higher quality, more finished game, but certainly early access in the sense that we are adding major updates to the game and developing it. But I think we just want to get the base quality of the new game to a very high and standard, where it just feels like a very well polished game, more like kind of Kara Command 2 does. If you've played that, kind of from our point of view, quite proud of building a more polished and finished game than Stormworks. With Stormworks, obviously, it's a different thing, and it's more expansive and has a lot more features. So there isn't a release date. I mean, I was hoping we'd have something out for this year, but now I'm thinking, oh well, hopefully next year. It's just too early to say. I don't know. Next question, please. Will there be support for changing the code for mods? So I think we've already covered this one. There could potentially be a Lua API for components, if that's what players want. I think we're just looking for feedback really on how players imagine our time is best spent on continuing to improve support for mods. But certainly I think that is obviously quite a popular one, and certainly the component modding I think has been received as being a major part of the overall modding. So potentially that will be a good place to be headed next. We shall see. Next question, please. Do you plan to store the mesh data for clothing outside the XE? I want to add clothing. So the clothing situation is, well, it's an animated mesh, so it's a different asset type, so we haven't added it at this point. And the animated pipeline is a little bit more complicated. So yeah, if that's something players want, of course, like, that's another direction that modding could move in. You will need us to expand the compiler so it can compile the animated meshes as well. But with the animations, they're built up from 2 files. You've got the actual mesh part of it, and then you've got like our own proprietary animation format, which is a file that contains the skeleton, the poses, and the animations. So we could add that in as well. Again, it's just what do we do next, as like what players' priorities are. But yes, we can do the I guess the character mesh modding, you will of course be using our anim tool. Just game animating is just such a pain, and getting the data in is such a pain because our animation requirements are reasonably straightforward. What we've ended up doing is making our own animation editing tool. It's not that flashy, it's a bit difficult to use. Once you get used to it, you can get the work done, do the animations reasonably simply, and it is easier than supporting animation imports from other software, just because the data does tend to come through in a bit of a mess in all sorts of different formats and sorts of different situations to deal with. So that's why we've ended up making our own animation tool. But then you have to use our animation tool, and our animation software, it's a bit like our tile editing software. It's not the smoothest. It's not been designed to be sent to players for players to use. So there's just that to consider. We don't plan it at the moment, but we're open to it, and we're just looking for player feedback. Next question, please. Friend got banned in multiplayer for a modified game client, not malicious. How to unban? Posted by user. I'm going to say that the chance of this being true is highly unlikely. Nobody has got banned for using a modified game client. And well, there's a few things that happen, but basically this is people who they pirate the DLC, and every now and again we look at the anti-cheat reports. We design the anti-cheat because players were some of the dedicated server owners were complaining to us that these players are coming on and they're ruining the experience for other players. They're using third-party cheats where they are using it to impersonate other users, or they're using it to access the admin controls. So we came in and we approached it from a few different angles. One is that we added this simple anti-cheat. It's not kernel level anti-cheat, it's just a simple anti-cheat. And then we also hardened some of the multiplayer protocols so that you couldn't impersonate other players or access the admin tools and so on. And we only ended up banning a couple of players for actually doing that stuff, but these anti-cheat tools basically mostly showed us, oh, there's another person who's, and it's not a huge number of people who are pirating the DLC. It's actually very, very rare, but there's some people who do it, and yeah, they're getting caught. And really, I mean, we're not banning anyone for doing it once or twice. It's where they've been doing it for months and months and been doing it a lot, and then they get a game ban applied. Half the time they've already got a game ban or a VAC ban or something, and the number of appeals we get on this is unbelievable. But then you look at the data and there's no mistake. It's like multiple indications of exactly what they're doing. We can see exactly how they've done it, and we can see exactly what tool they're using to do it, but so many people just claim they're innocent. It's unbelievable. Or they blame their brother. Then half the time, of course, it's like, oh, well, I'm just going to buy the game again, ha ha ha, and they admit to it in the end. But it's unbelievable. But yeah, this person, they didn't use a modified game client, and it wasn't not malicious, and they got banned for DLC piracy, guys. There's no doubt. Well, there is a doubt because I don't know which user this is. I don't know who they're talking about, but the people we're banning, it's 100% correct, and almost everyone who's been banned, which isn't that many people, it's DLC piracy, and no one likes it, and a lot of people come to us to complain and protest. But they pirated the game, didn't they? Or they pirated the DLC. Shameful. Let's carry on. Next question, please. Will we be able to ride horses? Also, Dark Side Tripper says a P-coat is a coat seaman wear. Okay. So it's some wearable item. We did add loads of wearable items. We don't currently have any more wearable items in the works, I don't think. So we don't currently have the P-coat plan. I suppose this is this like Pirates of the Caribbean era sailor wear, is it? I think it could be, couldn't it? So I don't know. Yeah, we don't currently have any more clothing items in progress. The question, will we be able to ride horses? I mean, you kind of can with the mod. Someone made the add-on where you've got the handle on the back of their head. I don't think we've currently got animal riding planned. So we don't have plans for being able to ride horses. I think in previous Q&As we've discussed the concept of a component that could attach to an animal, so you could pick animals up and so on. That could be cool. We don't have because you can put dogs in seats, right? Could we have some special seat for picking up large livestock and so on, that can grab them? Don't know. Is that something you want? I think you only really need it if you want to lower the cow into the Jurassic Park Velociraptor cage or something. I don't know what else. Rescuing an animal, transporting animals and so on. I think that could be quite useful for, but not sure. There's no plans at the moment, I'll say. Next question, please. For roleplay servers, we want the ability to go prone and mod item, gun systems, melee, RPG, mortar, aim. Yeah, very specific request. I mean, I like it, and I like the idea of players customizing the behavior of the game. It's just not particularly well set up for it's a very specific type of modding. So we're talking about a very specific API to replace the game logic for a specific part of the game. So we don't currently have plans for that. I think that would be quite difficult to do, and especially when it's only going to benefit very specific small community for one or a small number of servers. So I'm not sure that's going to happen. I do like the request. It's just difficult to prioritize that when it's for a smaller group of users, when there's so much we can do which benefits all players. I'll move on. Will pneumatic systems operation via pressure be added to the game? Oh, pneumatics. Probably not. Yeah, probably not. I like the pneumatics. I'd also like hydraulics. I'd like the stuff player said before about the torque robotic parts for like pivots and so on. And what I'm going to suggest is that the logic systems that are underpinning these systems aren't designed for being extended in this way. I think we've seen in the past the problem of extending those logic systems for other parts of the game. For example, like the compressed gases update gave players a lot of trouble. I know we're still got players complaining that their ship doesn't sink anymore, and I'll quickly discuss that one actually now. It's the I think there's certain players who, to make a sinking ship, they put a door on the bottom of their boat. They open the door and they expect the water to just come in. And that's what used to happen, but now we've added the compressed gases update. Of course, that door on the bottom of the ship, well, when it opens, it's acting like a moon pool. So what you're getting is some water comes in until the pressure in the air increases because it gets compressed, and then you get this equilibrium and more water doesn't come in. And of course, once you understand that, you just need to add some vents on, and then the gas can escape, relieving that pressure and allowing more fluid to flood in, and the ship can sink again. But if you don't understand that that's what's going on, then it kind of looks like the game's changed behavior, and it has changed behavior, and you need to understand what's going on in order to be able to resolve that. Now I've explained it, it seems quite straightforward, but if that hasn't been explained, you might just think that the game's broken. Of course, it's not. It's that we've changed the system, and changing these systems is a painful thing. It does cause creations to work ever so slightly differently, but even just very slight changes can have rippling effects on a creation's overall behavior. So basically, I think backporting this stuff into a game where the systems aren't initially designed to work for this stuff is probably not a good idea. What we're probably going to do is just end up with the system that doesn't work very well. If we were doing a game where it was meant to support pneumatics and was meant to support hydraulics and have energy conservation in certain ways, then that's of course possible. Of course, anything's possible, but it's going to be a lot better to build the systems up from scratch to support that, rather than try and add pneumatics and hydraulics into a game where the system can't be changed because it'll break creations, but then it has to be changed because it needs to support the hydraulics and pneumatics. So, very long-winded way of saying we'd love to do that stuff for a new game, and that's stuff we're really interested in doing. For this game, for Stormworks, I think it's a bad idea. I think what you just end up with is a bad implementation that doesn't make particularly well sense and isn't implemented as well as it perhaps could be, because it's being added in year 8 of development rather than pre-release. And I think that stuff's going to work a lot better in a new game, because we can do a good job of it when we're building it from the ground up to support it. The next question is a built-in system to edit a block size and shape so you don't need to change it in the files. So this is referring to some kind of developer support for XML editing. We don't plan this. I think that with the XML editing, it's like officially not supported, not because we don't like what it does or that we don't like what players creating with it. I think the XML edited vehicle creations are often really nice. They look really great. I think the matter is just that you're just modifying the graphics transform of that component, so you're just modifying its graphical appearance. You're not actually modifying its actual function. And with a game like Stormworks, it's all about the link between function. It's not about cosmetics. It's about what the game does, what the components do, and so on. And where we're adding a support for doing stuff where it's just actually changing the rendering but without changing the physics shape of the component, then you end up with rendering of physics that doesn't match up. So I don't think we're going to add official support for that. But that said, I think the XML editing is reasonably well documented, and a lot of players have created the workshop packs so you can kind of cut and paste the block you want. I think it's just probably useful for us to underline that that's not guaranteed to work. It's not an intended feature of the game, and while we don't mind players doing it, I think we're just pointing out that it doesn't work in a way that's robust enough to kind of be an official feature of the game. The next question is, could optimizations be considered for an update to remove junk code, avoid unplayable servers? So I don't think there is any junk code. I mean, certainly with Stormworks, hands up, we're in year 8 or year 9 of development now. 2018 is when we released. We did the beta in 2014, so plus 7 years would have been September this year. So that would have been 7 years since we initially released the first alpha to the public, and then of course that would mean that we're in year 8 of development now. I think certainly building the fresh game, we are doing things very differently to how we started building Stormworks. But a lot of the code in Stormworks, like, there's a lot of code, but it all does stuff. And you kind of get in there and you realise that a lot of the systems, that they seem elegant and systems based, but there's actually like a lot of business logic in there. Certainly not all of the code is perfect, but with big projects, I mean, it kind of never is. And actually, with the situation we've got the game working in at this point, it's there's a lot of context you can play the game, and the game doesn't crash. There's plenty of players who say, "Oh, the game's never crashed for me." There's players who obviously do get the crashes, but I think it's frequently graphics driver crashes where they're playing on specific hardware with specific drivers that are a problem. But the multiplayer does continue to be a point of complaint. But I don't think it's bad code. I think it's the way the game is built in supporting the multiplayer. It doesn't work particularly well in certain situations. In certain situations, the multiplayer is absolutely fine. in other situations, there's certain contexts where the multiplayer gives a very, very bad experience, and those situations are high packet loss. If you're getting lots of packet loss, you're running out bandwidth, perhaps because you've got downloads in the background or you've got low bandwidth connection. And then, of course, if either you or the server has got the below minimum spec computer and you're spawning large creations. And they seem to be the problems players are having. I think it's probably packet loss is a major complaint, and the game's just not designed to handle packet loss. We're using kind of a deterministic style of multiplayer, which is often what you'd get with a strategy game. It's not ideal for a first-person game because the packet loss implication, when you get the packet loss, you do get the lag as the data is getting resent. So that doesn't work particularly well, but it does work very, very, very well for a game as complex as Stormworks, where you've got a huge amount of data that you're trying to replicate. So it's a very technical answer to say that the multiplayer code is kind of good and bad at the same time. I think as a new game we would do things differently, but that's not to say you can just rewrite the multiplayer code in Stormworks and do something else, because there's so much, the way the data is arranged in Stormworks, there's so much information that it's really difficult to use a different strategy, but it just means that you've now got this multiplayer that is very sensitive to packet loss. And I think that's probably what the complaints are for multiplayer, but it's hard to say because none of the complaints ever really go into any detail. They just claim that multiplayer is broken for everyone, where it obviously isn't. So it's difficult to really make too much headway on that, other than to say that's my current understanding of the multiplayer issues. And certainly we do improve code as we go, but I'm not really aware of any junk code. It's just a big project with a lot of different features that's been developed over a long period of time. The next question: why doesn't the AI plane fire rockets on or missiles? Because I can see that they have them. Yeah, that would be cool, wouldn't it? I think it's more or less set up. I think it's just a case of the vehicle creations. The way the AI stuff works is that you've got like an actual character that the script spawns the vehicle, and they spawn a AI operator, and they place them in the seat. And of course they then set them AI mode, and I think there's a specific mode for flying planes, and then that plane will try and fly towards the player, and if they're lined up they will pull the trigger. And of course that trigger could be linked to the machine guns, which it currently is, but there's no reason why it can't be linked to rocket pods or missiles as well. So that stuff could all work. It's just that we've just not got around to making the content. It's very add-onable, it's very moddable, and it's something we could add ourselves. I will note that one down because, you know, that's pretty cool, isn't it? So we're saying AI weapons vehicles to fire rockets and missiles. I'll chat about that with the development team, because yeah, I mean, that would be cool, and we've done all the code for it. It's literally just making the vehicle, I think. I'll carry on. So what's the next question? Thoughts on making wheel/track width independent, adjustable from standard size diameter? So this is a good suggestion. I think we've obviously done the bar for wheels, haven't we? So that's how that works. And we're saying, okay, we could add a bar that changes the width, and presumably that's the rendered width of stuff. We are working on your smaller too wide tracks at the moment, so that is coming, and I think we're probably better to just do that rather than start to add in a different feature, because I think both of those would be, but that's not the worst suggestion at all, that you could just have a slider that changes the width of your tracks, and then players could just have any width they wanted. That's quite a good suggestion. I think it's just we've already started working on the new track components that are too wide, but the small wheels, and are there others there? I'm not sure, but hopefully that problem's going to be solved by these new components. So let's just do that first. the next question is, will there be a logic node for train wheels to detach from rails for rail maintenance trucks? Yeah, I like it. It's quite cool, isn't it? I mean, there's no reason why not. I suppose we can connect the wheels. I'm kind of surprised we haven't already done that. I suppose you'd kind of think just like an on-off input to release the train connection would be a thing. I know that you can go off the end of a train track and it disconnects, so it is possible. So I will note that down and I'll discuss that with the team. I can't think why we wouldn't have done that. On-off to disconnect train wheels. Yeah, you could even have an accelerometer to maybe disconnect some of your wheels if you exceeded a certain side velocity or whatever, to simulate derailing or whatever. That could be cool. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know why we haven't done that. It sounds like a good idea to me. I'll discuss it with the team. Next question, can you please make the editor hitboxes of components, seats and buttons smaller so they can fit? Yeah, so I think it's the number of voxels, and I know that some of these component modding changes have made the 2 wide seats, and we've done it ourselves, haven't we, because we added the bench seat. But my answer has previously been, well, the 3 wide means that it's the odd even component conundrum. You kind of need a standardization here. Either vehicles are even number wide or they're an odd number wide, and that's just because your center line has to either be in the center of a block or between 2 blocks. And that's important for any vehicle where it's meant to be symmetrical, where there's components that need to be symmetrical in the center, because otherwise you end up with, like, say your vehicle is 8 blocks wide, you've got your engine that needs to be centered. Well, that now needs to be 4 blocks wide or 2 blocks wide. It can't be 3 blocks wide, because then it can't be placed on the center line. It's going to be offset, and the weight is going to be unevenly distributed, and so on. So that's why we've kind of got this logic where we've tried an odd number, and that's really so that it can fit in a symmetrical way on the center line of a vehicle. If it isn't going to be going on the center line, then it can be, it doesn't have to be, it can be an even number. And that's true for a lot of vehicles, right? Like a lot of cars, there's 2 seats on the front, and that would be either side of the symmetry line, so why not have a 2 wide seat for that situation? So there's lots of situations where they do work. It's just the issue of then you're creating this situation where you've got a seat that can't be placed on the center line anymore because it's the wrong number of blocks wide, and now it's an even vehicle width game, which doesn't necessarily work as well, because then you can't have odd width components, because then they can't go on the center line. So it's one or the other situation, which is why we've always been resistant to even number of block width components, because they don't work on the center line. But I know that some of it's been modded out, and you kind of think, oh, I'm not really sure what the downside of that is. Maybe we should just do that. Remove the reserved voxel on the front of some components. I think we've tried to do that for a lot of stuff. I think it's just where we've got more than one logic node on a component, it's difficult to do. So for example, like buttons have an input and an output, don't they? So they need to have 2 voxels, so we kind of need that second reserved voxel for the input. But we have made components smaller where we can. Think it's a bit, how many seats do we end up with here if we start making 2 width versions of everything, and is that a good thing, a good design direction to go in? I don't know. I think having better modding support for components might be a better answer there, so that players can kind of just do what they want and use the modded 2 wide seats on the workshop, which are already available. I don't know. It's a tricky one, you see, though. There is an upside and a downside to this, as I've just highlighted. It's a difficult one to answer. I can't really give it a yes or no on the spot on that, I'm afraid. I just don't know. The next question, will you ever add new things to the DLCs, like the weapons DLC? So I think we have done. I think we do add stuff to DLCs from time to time. They aren't massive changes, but I think we are very happy to carry on supporting the DLCs, particularly to get them work, keep them, make sure they're functioning well. And I'm sure we have added more content for all of the DLCs at some point or another. I'm trying to think when the last bit was, but I'm sure we added some weapons DLC stuff more recently that made a good impact. It is less frequent than adding general stuff to the game. I suppose to some degree the driver for that is probably that we were kind of aware, not all players are going to benefit from that if we do that. But that said, actually the DLCs are very, very frequently bought with the game. I think I'm going to guess that over half players have weapons DLC, and I think Space and Arid aren't quite as well taken up, but they are still reasonably high numbers for those as well. So actually doing DLC stuff should be something we're doing. I'm not sure exactly what the stuff we'd be adding would be though, but yes, we are up for adding stuff to the DLCs, and certainly let us know your feature requests. Next question, will you add an in-game island asset editor to make modding possible without third-party apps? So there's currently, players have the hacked version, don't they, of the tile editor that they use for a bunch of stuff, which is actually, it's in the game, it's just hidden. There's no button. There's a button that we have, and that button gets hidden when we distribute the game, and someone's hacked the game to show the button, or just access that area or whatever. Yes, that is one of the next things we could do for modding. I think it's about figuring out what the next most important thing is, and we'll do it. And if that's the next most important thing, then great. Obviously, you might say, well, no, the next most important thing was that component modding stuff you were talking about, or just this other completely different modding stuff, or the animated meshes that we talked about before. I think it's just deciding what the next thing to do is. But yeah, we've already got a tool. It's not the best, most easy to use tool, but it's certainly easier than doing it yourself, although some of these third-party apps are pretty bloody good, better than we've made, so I don't know. It could be. We can enable that if that's what players want. Next question, will support for mods eliminate DLC in the future? I don't know, we have more plans for DLC right now. We still don't have a plan to release another DLC for Stormworks. Obviously, support is continuing, but honestly, we just want to do. We only want to do stuff if it's working well for us and well for players. And there's so much stuff that fits the bill, where we can do stuff that makes players really happy and it's good for us too. And I'm not sure DLC's in that category right now. If we have a good idea for a DLC, then we're well up for doing more DLC. But we're not planning on it anyway. Do mods fully replace DLC? I mean, if they did, it's not like a bad thing. I don't know whether anyone's really going to make a weapons DLC. I mean, even if people were making mods, I'm not sure. I think the paid weapons DLC would still probably be worth it. It's not necessarily that it eliminates DLC. We can still do paid updates that would hopefully be better than the stuff that's available for free, but maybe not. And I mean, if it was to eliminate DLC in the future, I mean, I think that would be fine, right? I think if people are making stuff with DLC that is better than the mods we're making, I mean, that's just great result for everyone. So I don't really think in those terms. I mean, I don't think it would, but because I think there's always going to be stuff that we can change in the core game engine that enables a lot of stuff that we can't, even if we added loads of Lua APIs and stuff we wouldn't be able to replace. But I wouldn't be offended if it did. I don't think it's something that's concerning us. Next question, will we at some point be able to mod the game with code? I think we kind of already discussed that. I think we're up for adding Lua APIs if that's what you guys want, and we're just looking for that feedback. Next question, will there be more missions and things to do in the world? The answer is, can the community submit suggestions? Yes, you can. Please use the issue tracker and request a feature and just explain what the mission would be and what you expect to happen, what you expect the experience to be, and certainly there will be more missions. I think we've got some more mission-based content coming in the nearest future, next few months. And that's something we've been working on. I think throughout this year we've done several mission improvements, several mission expansions, and it's just little bits here and there, but it does add up. And I think if you compare Stormworks at the end of this year to be where it was at the end of last year, the mission content is a lot better. But obviously it happens gradually, it changes gradually, and it's not as obvious. But yeah, we've been continuing to improve that. I'm really pleased with what we've done this year, and there is more to come. Sorry I've asked already, but VR support in the future. This one always comes up. We don't want people vomiting all over their keyboard because they got massively seasick with the ultimate seasickness simulator. I think VR is cool. We've done VR for carrier command. I think something you realise as soon as you start developing a VR game, you realise just how important scale is in a VR game. With Stormworks, I think you would very quickly realise that the game isn't quite the right scale. You're sitting in a cockpit and you can't reach the buttons, but in single player, in non-VR mode, that's fine. It's not until you put the helmet on, you've got depth perception, you realise, oh yeah, that's further apart. It looks cosmetically okay, but when you've got depth perception, it's actually too far away or too close, and it's just so sensitive to that stuff. So I think if you were doing a building game that supported VR, it would kind of want to be VR from the start. And yeah, I'm a big fan of VR. We're not planning on doing it. And I think also there's a seasickness issue, right? You're gonna be ill. It's as soon as that ship starts rocking and you got the helmet on and it's already a little bit motion sicky. Oh my god, it's gonna be awful. So I think it's probably best we don't. And certainly, I think you want the VR experience to be really high quality. So you do want it to be in from the start and specifically built for VR, which it wouldn't be, so I think it's a bad idea to try and strap it on at the end. Next question, can we get the same exact overlays like wind, temperature, fog, etc. things in map view to display? And then I guess it's been cut off. The display, what could it be? On the map, I suppose, on the Lua Map screen. I'll discuss it with the team. I don't know how difficult or easy that's going to be. Probably not is the answer, but I will ask weather, fog, wind on Lua Map. Noted. So similar question to Darkside Tripper, but is there any chance on connectors that transmit RPS? Do we not have anything? I know we've got all the other ones, haven't we? And I suppose this is useful for some stuff. I know that like tractors and stuff do have the torque connectors on them, don't they, for like certain farming equipment. It attaches to the engine, doesn't it, and it drives the rotary cutters and whatever. Like with the hydraulics, I suppose you can just use the logic connections and electric, and that just works. But and you've got the robotic parts, but to have like RPS transmitting thing, presumably you might want to have a connectable vehicle that, yeah, I mean, I think that's quite like a nice generic component, isn't it? So RPS connector, I'll note that one down. It kind of sounds like the kind of thing that might just be a really useful building block just for making creations, which I can't quite imagine sat here, but our creative players will find stuff for. I've just clicked onto page 3. Let's keep going. It's 5:30 now. We've been running for an hour 20. We'll keep going for a bit longer. I just want to answer as many of your questions as possible. If you're still with me, thank you very much for your patience and sticking with me. We'll carry on answering the questions. Ideas on adding a harness outfit to tie yourself to winches, rope anchors to use tools on rappel. I mean, it's awesome, right? I love that. I think we've had it written down before. It's a great idea. I think it's just a little bit tricky. We've certainly got the kind of the thing where if you're holding a rope, it does kind of let the rope out at a set speed, doesn't it? So you kind of descend and rappel down a little bit. It's more of a controlled descent rather than rappelling, isn't it? Because you kind of can't really wheel it in or wheel it out yourself. and certainly being a bit more realistic would be cool. But I don't know. I think probably not for Stormworks. It's the kind of thing I'd hope we'd get into the new game. But again, the new game isn't Stormworks. It's not Stormworks 2, so I don't know whether that's really a relevant thing to mention here. But it is a great idea. I do like it. I'd love to do it. Very possible for the future. I don't think we're going to start working it in the next 6 months, though. I think we've kind of got our work planned out for 6 months, and this isn't something we've planned. I'd love to think we'll get around to it. I just don't know. Next question, will we get proper runways anytime soon? So I'm not sure what a proper runway is meant by. I mean, we've got runways, they've got lights, they might be a bit on the short side, but that's kind of okay for Stormworks because you can do a short takeoff because of the way physics works. So I'm not really sure what a proper runway means. Next question, can we get some sort of support for adding custom behavior to custom blocks? It is important, and I think that component modding stuff that we talked about probably does cover that question quite well, so I will move on. Why can't we add new tile files? With the old modding way, we could add new tiles to volcanic. I think that the new modding way works exactly the same as the old modding way. If not, it's because someone's masked off. So I'm not entirely sure what's meant. I thought you would already be able to add new tiles to volcanic. I don't think you've ever been able to place like tiles down where there currently isn't a tile. I don't think that's ever been possible just because of how our world generation stuff works. So I'm not really sure what's meant by that. It should be the same. In some places we have masked files off. I remember someone pointed out that the map preview, the map view of an island wasn't working, and we did fix that, and we added support in, so you can make the bin file now in order to be able to show your island on the map if you've made an island. And it's possible that some of the files are still masked off, but I don't think they should be, and I don't think they are, so I'm not sure if that's correct, or if it is, I'm unaware of the issue. So if there is an issue, someone could please make an issue on the issue tracker and let us know. Thank you. Next question, will there be more official preset vehicles or tutorials to make learning the game easier? Whew, that's a good one, isn't it? I think it's like a long-term issue. You know, Stormworks has always been complicated. Learning the game has always been difficult. I don't know. The videos are quite old now, but I think they are still like valid. They are still up to date. They are still reflecting the game, and they are useful. The preset vehicles, I think it's always a good thing for us to do, and we are trying to add more presets as we add more features now. So there could be. We're not currently planning on it, and I think it's somewhat of a reflection or an admission of the game just being very complicated, and it's just simply that there's just too much to teach. So it does feel a bit overwhelming, and that's because it is overwhelming, because there's just so much to learn, and it does take a lot of hours to kind of get to the point where you're comfortable, and then it feels like it's less overwhelming, and you can just start to sit down and learn a specific component and so on. But yeah, I would like the game to be better documented. I think it's difficult to document everything because the game's just ridiculously big with so many features and algorithms and equations and so on that it's just too much to write down. The source code's like 100 megabytes or something. I mean, with all of that explained, we were to expand that into plain English, you know, it would be 10,000 pages of writing. I don't know. It's just difficult to explain everything. Certainly gameplay is through that starting experience is important, but the tutorial does do that to a fair degree, and the bigger you make the tutorial, the kind of more difficult it is to complete it and get through it, and then the tutorial feels overwhelming. So I think it's just a shortcoming of the Stormworks design, where it's just quite complicated. My voice is going, but I'm going to carry on. Right, we'll see how more questions we can do. Do you think in the future to add more AI like traffic on roads, civilian or enemy trains? No, because of the performance impact. I think it's probably going to be detrimental to performance to have loads of AI traffic. I think it's probably best we don't do that. Next question, will the ability and tools needed to mod clothing animation and anim files in general be added? I think we've already talked about this. We can add it. It's just what stuff do you want to be modding next? We can add it all. It's going to take time for us to prepare the tools for a public release and get all those files working and tested and document it and put it in the wiki and so on. But it's something that can happen. Geometer has been broken for a year. I can reply or make new reports. So I can't. Can I get in contact? Is this already answered? Is this the issue with the tracking? I mean, I guess you can reach out to us on Discord with ModMail if you're not able to contact us through Geometer. It's not our intention to be confrontational with players. We don't want to tell players they've done anything wrong. In many cases, they haven't done anything wrong. But I think it's probably right that we do filter spam, and so it's just. But we don't want to tell players, oh, you're spamming and it's wrong, because they might just trying to be helpful. It's just a difficult situation with that stuff, and it's not necessarily the case in this person's case. I don't know what the situation is, but you can send a message to ModMail on the Discord if you're not having any luck with geometer.co.uk. Next question, could a farming update be a possibility in future? Of course it can. I will be transparent. We are not currently working on farming. We don't have it planned. It's kind of one of the ones, it's on the list of things we could potentially do in the future. We're just not doing it right now. I will quickly mention, I'm just looking at this, the video's looped a couple of times now. I'm obviously not playing live. This is stuff we recorded yesterday. I can't talk and play at the same time. It's not a good idea. So yeah, I just recorded about 45 minutes of footage yesterday, and it's just playing in a loop, just as something to be on screen. Let's go to the next question. Will we ever get a Lua script block editor for the vast amount of players that struggle with code? No. You've already got the microprocessor editor where you can place using the and the or and the add and the multiply and stuff. So you've got that. You've also got the Lua, but you do have the other stuff already if you struggle with code. I think I kind of already regret like having two sides of the microprocessor, because I think the Lua does everything and better than the basic blocks, and we'd have been better just adding the Lua to start with. But we've already got the two methods there. Generally, as a design rule, I would imagine that having two systems that do the same thing is a bad idea. It's poor design, because then you just end up with this kind of cloudy, what's the best way to do it, and it's not clear to players. Oh, there's two options, why have they given me two options? You know, it's kind of not clear. And actually, in the Stormworks case, I would say almost always just using the Lua is probably the way to go, unless it's extremely simple. So I think adding a third way would be probably quite damaging to the experience of playing Stormworks. I will carry on. Hang on, I'm on the edge of page 3. What I will do is I'll go back to the start page 1. How many pages do I have now? It still says 3 pages. Have I answered all the questions? We've got 5 more. Please don't answer any more questions. Ask any more questions now. I'll just get these answered, and then I've actually answered everyone's questions, and then we'll bring the stream to an end. I have been talking all day and my voice is completely gone. Let's do this. Let's get these last questions answered. Do you plan on adding more ways on making power like hydrogen combustion engines? The answer is that we don't plan on adding more. I think this is kind of a question we've probably answered before, and I think it's just a question of what does it add to the game. We don't have extremely one-to-one realistic engines to start with. So is adding a new type of fuel necessarily going to do any more than just have a new engine that just has the word hydrogen instead of the word diesel? Like it's that kind of thing. Or like petrol engines, for example, people ask for, and we say, well, what's the difference between a petrol engine and a diesel engine, except for where the text is here in the game? And I think when we're making Stormworks, the focus is always on the mechanics of the game. It's about what you can do, how the mechanics are working from a gameplay point of view. So probably not on the cards. We have added other engines. We added obviously the liquid fuel engines at one point, or the hydrogen oxygen engines and stuff. So we can. It's possible in the future. Your question does say, do you plan? That's a very easy answer to answer, because I know that we don't currently plan on it. Anything's possible, and we do change our mind all the time. Will modding of game physics be possible? By Thales. So I guess we're saying, oh, it would be nice to mod the aerodynamics, the hydrodynamics, and so on. I guess the answer is that the aerodynamics and hydrodynamics is a humongous block of code inside the game, and it's in C++, and I don't think we're planning on allowing players to mod binaries. So where it's C++ code, it's performance intense code. It's not going to make sense to convert it into Lua so that you can then mod it, like it might do for some other parts of the game, for example, because the game's just not going to work anymore. You can't. It's going to be too slow. It's going to be 50 times slower than it currently is. It just wouldn't work. So then it's a question of, oh well, we could move it into a DLL, and then you can mod your DLL and so on. I mean, for safety reasons, we're not currently planning on doing that. So I don't know. I would say probably the game physics is probably not realistic for this game. The next question is, can we pick up cats like dogs, please? So I think it's the Scottish wild cat, isn't it? And you can't pick it up apparently. Some of the smaller animals you can pick up. I'll write this one down. I imagine. I don't know. Are they aggressive? They're not aggressive, are they? Pick up cat. All right. Pick up cat. Don't see why. It's probably one bool to just change to make it pickupable, because I think you can pick up goats, can't you? You can pick up sheep, maybe. I'm not sure. So the smaller animals you are meant to be able to pick up. I'll ask the team about that one. Any plans on making Server 64 into a Linux version? There really isn't, and I'll just quickly touch on that. Effectively, we're just trying to make, I suppose our current direction is do less to a higher quality, and supporting a Linux distribution onto what we're already doing just feels like another thing that's going to be breaking, and we're going to have to go and fix. So we're less keen to do that, especially with there being, I guess, lower interest in it, because obviously you can just host the server on Windows, or I think you can probably already host it on Linux just using Wine. But I'm not sure exactly what the instructions are for setting yourself up to be running it on Wine. But I imagine it just works because the normal game works on Wine, so why wouldn't the dedicated server? So it is already possible as well. So it seems like a lot of it's a very big distraction for us that would just kind of be ongoing and constantly pulling us off doing other stuff for players in an area where there's not too much demand. So it's just me sat here just trying to balance, I guess, making sure that our time is giving players the best benefit, and in that case I think it's a bit too specific just to artificial support of what you can probably just already do with Wine. Next question, could canaries be added over railways from Dead Dolphin Man? Oh, canaries, what am I saying? catenaries. So I'm going to guess this is the rail. No, is this the overhead electric lines? Yes, I've had to search on Google, and of course it is. Yes, okay. I didn't know this word. They could be added. Should they be added? I don't know. I mean, it's a very specific type of railway, isn't it? Right? Like, not all railway lines have them. So obviously us not having them on our railway lines kind of makes sense, because most railways don't have them. Most railway lines, like in the US or whatever, it's all, you know, diesel trains and or running on old steam line or whatever, and there's no overhead power lines, and that's fine. That makes sense. In the UK, sometimes we have a third rail in some places. We don't have the overhead lines, so it's not that they're like missing as such. Should we add them? Kind of changes the game location. I would say for a very specific location mod like that, I think we should probably rely on modders to be looking at that kind of change. And I think I'll just highlight here, we absolutely don't expect modders to make the game for us. I think it's a great feature though to add it, to be able to say, look, if you've got a specific community, if you've got a specific requirement that isn't part of what the core Stormworks is and what the core Stormworks should be, you can still go and take the Stormworks and move it into this different, very specialist place for your specific community, and that's supported via mods. But I think it's not really required for the core game or the base game, and it shouldn't necessarily be required. It's not really within the scope, so I'll probably say that we're not going to do that, but they could be added via modding. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I hope that was useful. Please do let me know if it was. Really appreciate everyone who's turned up to listen to me talk, and I do hope the answers were useful. I really appreciate everyone taking the time to come and chat to us.